There was a night many years ago when I sat across from Andrew Carnegie in the soft amber light of his private study, and he told me something I have never been able to forget. He leaned forward with that quiet intensity which only men of great accomplishment seem to possess, and he said that the loudest men he had ever known were almost always the poorest, and the wealthiest, the most enduring figures he had encountered in a lifetime of building empires were almost always the quietest. I did not understand him then. I was younger, hungrier, more eager to be heard than to listen. But the years have a way of teaching what no man can be told. And now, after observing more than 500 of the most successful individuals of our time, I have come to see that Carnegie was pointing at one of the deepest secrets of human achievement. He was pointing at the marriage of focus and silence, that strange and almost sacred alliance which separates the man who merely dreams from the man who builds. I want you to consider for a moment the curious fact that nearly every great fortune, every great invention, every great work of art was conceived in silence and forged in disciplined focus. Edison did not announce his 10,000 failures to the world. He buried himself in his laboratory, alone with the stubborn filaments that refused to glow. Lincoln did not broadcast his despair through his many defeats. He walked the long roads of Illinois with a book under his arm, training his mind in the quiet hours when no one was watching. Carnegie did not boast of his mastermind alliances. He cultivated them in private rooms with men whose names the public would never know. There is a pattern here, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The men and women who shape the world do their deepest work in the chambers of silence, and they do it with a focus so complete that the world around them seems for a time to disappear. But here begins the darkest game of the subconscious mind, because the modern man has been trained almost from birth to fear silence. He fills every empty moment with noise. He reaches for his phone before his feet touch the floor. He listens to voices in his ears as he walks, as he cooks, as he falls asleep. He has lost the ancient art of being alone with his own thoughts, and in losing it, he has lost something far more precious than he realizes. He has lost the conditions under which definite purpose is born. For definite purpose, that great organizing principle of every successful life, does not arrive in the marketplace. It does not announce itself in the crowd. It comes to a man in the quiet hour, when his mind has stopped its endless chatter, when his thoughts have settled like sediment in still water, and the deeper currents of his being can finally be heard. I have watched men strive for years toward goals they never truly chose. They wanted what their neighbors wanted. They pursued what the magazines told them to pursue. They built lives that looked from the outside like success, and yet inside they felt the slow ache of a soul that had never been consulted. And when I would ask them in the rare moments when they allowed themselves to be honest what they truly wanted, they would fall silent. And in that silence I would see the tragedy of a life lived without focus. They had never sat with themselves long enough to find out who they were. They had been too busy, too distracted, too afraid of what the silence might reveal. What Hill discovered about this subject is deeply unsettling because it suggests that most of the suffering we experience is not the result of misfortune, but of misdirection. We are not failing because the world is against us. We are failing because we have never decided with the full force of our being what we are for. Definite major purpose is not a slogan you tape to your bathroom mirror. It is a fire you light in the depths of your subconscious mind, and it can only be lit when the noise has been silenced long enough for the spark to catch. This is why discipline matters. This is why focus is not a luxury, but a necessity. Without them, the fire never starts. With them, it becomes a furnace that no obstacle can extinguish. Consider what it means to focus. The word itself comes from the Latin for hearth, the fireplace at the center of the home, the gathering point around which a family organized its life. To focus is to bring your scattered energies to a single burning center, and to keep them there long enough for transformation to occur. The mind that wanders is like a fire spread thin across a field. It gives no warmth and cooks no food. But the mind that gathers itself, the mind that returns again and again to a single object of devotion, becomes a forge in which the raw material of thought is shaped into the steel of accomplishment. Every great achiever I have studied possessed this gathering power. They could think about one thing for a long time. They could return to it after interruption. And this capacity, more than talent, more than circumstance, was the source of their power. Now, I want you to think about discipline because this word has been corrupted in our age, and we must restore its dignity. Discipline does not mean punishment. It does not mean denying yourself the things you love. It comes from the same root as disciple, and a disciple is one who follows a teaching with devotion. To be disciplined is to be devoted to your own becoming. It is to treat your highest purpose as a sacred calling and to organize your daily life around its service. The undisciplined man is not free. He is a slave to whatever impulse passes through him in any given hour. He is governed by his appetites, his moods, the notifications on his screen, the opinions of strangers. The disciplined man, by contrast, has gathered his life into his own hands. He has decided what matters, and he has arranged his hours so that what matters receives the lion's share of his energy. This is freedom, though it wears the costume of constraint. The detail most people overlook is hidden right here in the relationship between discipline and silence. You cannot discipline a mind that you cannot hear. You cannot govern a self that you have never met. And you will never meet yourself in the noise of the world. You will only meet the version of yourself that the world has constructed for you, the borrowed personality, the inherited ambitions, the second-hand dreams. To meet your true self, the self that is connected to infinite intelligence, the self that knows what it was sent here to do, you must descend into silence. You must give your subconscious mind the conditions under which it can speak, and those conditions are stillness and undivided attention. I have often thought that the modern world is structured almost perfectly to prevent this descent. Every device in your pocket is engineered to keep your attention scattered. Every advertisement is designed to make you want what you do not have. Every platform is built to compare you in real time with the curated highlight reels of strangers. The cumulative effect of these forces is a kind of low-grade hypnosis in which the average man drifts through his days in a fog of borrowed desires never quite present to his own life. And the tragedy is that he often does not even know he is in the fog. He thinks this is simply what life feels like. He has forgotten that there is another mode of existence in which the mind is clear, the purpose is sharp, and the days move with the rhythm of a deep and chosen intention. Carnegie used to say that a man's wealth was determined not by what he earned, but by what he did with his attention. Attention, he believed, was the true currency of life. You could squander it, as most men did, on 1,000 trivial pursuits, or you could invest it, as the great achievers did, in a single magnificent obsession. The man who scatters his attention across 100 half-finished projects ends his life with nothing to show. The man who pours his attention day after day, year after year, into one definite purpose ends his life having built something that outlasts him. This is the law of compounding focus, and it is as reliable as the law of compounding interest. Small deposits of attention made consistently into a single account of purpose will yield a fortune that no thief can steal. But the most surprising part comes only now, because I want to tell you what happens inside a man when he begins to practice this discipline of focused silence. At first, it is uncomfortable. The mind, having been trained for years to seek constant stimulation, will resist. It will offer you 1,000 reasons to abandon the practice. It will remind you of urgent emails, of conversations you have not had, of entertainments you are missing. It will manufacture a sense of restlessness so acute that you may believe you are doing something wrong. But if you persist, if you sit with the discomfort and refuse to flee, something begins to shift. The surface of the mind grows quieter. The compulsive thinking slows. And in the spaces between thoughts, you begin to hear something you have not heard in a very long time. You begin to hear yourself. This is the moment when the inner journey truly begins. This is the moment when autosuggestion becomes more than a technique. It becomes a conversation with the deeper self. When you speak your definite purpose to your subconscious mind in the silence of disciplined focus, the words do not bounce off the surface and dissipate as they do when you mumble them in a distracted state. They sink, they penetrate, they reach the soil where seeds actually grow. And the subconscious mind, which has been waiting perhaps for years for clear instructions from its master, begins to organize itself around the purpose you have planted. It begins to draw to you the people, the resources, the opportunities that align with your aim. This is not magic. This is the lawful operation of a mind that has finally been given a clear command. The real turning point begins here, when you understand that thriving in silence is not about withdrawing from the world, but about returning to it with greater power. The hermit who flees society has not mastered silence. He has merely traded one kind of escape for another. The true master of silence is the one who can carry the inner stillness into the noisy marketplace and remain unmoved by it. He walks among the crowds, but the crowds do not enter him. He hears the gossip, but the gossip does not stick to him. This is the man who, when he speaks, speaks with weight, because he has not wasted his words on trivialities. This is the man whose presence calms a room, because he has first calmed himself. This is the man who, in the end, accomplishes what others only talk about. I think now of the great paradox at the heart of this teaching, the paradox that the men who say the least often achieve the most. We live in a culture that confuses visibility with success, that mistakes the noise of self-promotion for the substance of accomplishment. But the laws of the mind do not change because the fashions of the age have changed. The man who broadcasts his every plan dissipates the energy of those plans before they can be executed. The man who shares his ambitions too freely invites the doubts and discouragements of others to infect his own conviction. The mastermind principle is not a contradiction of this rule, it is a refinement of it. You speak of your purposes only with those who can hold them with reverence, only with those who have committed themselves to your success as you have committed to theirs. To everyone else, you remain quietly at work, letting the results speak when the time is ripe. There is a discipline of speech that accompanies the discipline of focus, and the two are inseparable. The man who cannot govern his tongue cannot govern his mind, and the man who cannot govern his mind cannot govern his life. I have watched promising careers destroyed by a single careless word, spoken in the heat of a moment, when the speaker had not yet learned the value of the pause. The pause, that small gift of silence between stimulus and response, is the workshop in which wisdom is made. The undisciplined man has no pause. He reacts before he reflects. He speaks before he thinks. The disciplined man, by contrast, lives in the pause. He has trained himself to hold the moment open, to consider the deeper implications, to act from the center rather than from the surface. This is why he seems, to those around him, to possess a kind of magic. But it is not magic. It is silence, practiced until it became a power. What the lives of great achievers have been trying to tell us for centuries is that the outer world is shaped by the inner world, and the inner world is shaped by the quality of one's attention. Edison, when asked the secret of his genius, did not speak of intelligence or inspiration. He spoke of the ability to concentrate on a single problem until it yielded its answer. Tesla performed his most astonishing feats of engineering entirely in his imagination, in long hours of solitary visualization, before ever lifting a tool. Henry Ford built his empire on the principle of focused work, the conviction that a man who concentrated all his energies on one definite aim would inevitably overtake the man who divided his energies among many. These were not men of exceptional gifts. They were men of exceptional gathering. They could collect themselves and direct themselves, and in this they surpassed the merely talented. I want to speak now about the modern condition, because I see in it a great wound that calls out for the medicine I am describing. The young man of today is awash in possibility, and yet he often feels paralyzed. He has access to more information than any generation in history, and yet he cannot decide what to do with his life. He is connected to thousands of people, and yet he is profoundly lonely. He has every tool that ambition could require, and yet he cannot seem to begin. Why? Because he has never been taught the prerequisite to all achievement, which is the capacity to be alone with himself, to focus his mind on a single chosen aim, to discipline his days around that aim, and to do this work in the silence where no applause can reach him. He has been taught to perform, but not to produce. He has been taught to be seen, but not to see. There is a sickness of our time, which I would call the sickness of the scattered self. Its symptoms are familiar to almost everyone. a vague anxiety that has no specific object, a chronic restlessness that no amount of activity can satisfy, a creeping suspicion that one is missing out on something, though one cannot say what, a feeling of being busy without being productive, of working without progressing, of moving without arriving. These are the symptoms of a mind that has lost its center. The cure is not more stimulation. The cure is the long, patient labor of returning to oneself, of relearning the lost art of focus, of rebuilding the inner architecture that allows a human being to know what he wants and to pursue it with steady devotion. But discipline without purpose becomes mere asceticism, and silence without direction becomes mere emptiness. This is why the third element, the element of definite aim, is so essential. You do not focus for the sake of focusing. You do not sit in silence for the sake of sitting. You focus because there is something you have been called to build, and you sit in silence because that is where the blueprints are revealed to you. Definite major purpose gives shape to your discipline and meaning to your silence. It is the magnetic north toward which the compass of your attention points. Without it, your focus has no object, and your silence becomes a void rather than a womb. With it, every moment of disciplined attention becomes a deposit in the account of your becoming. How do you find this definite purpose? Not by thinking harder, not by making lists of your skills and interests. These are useful exercises, but they operate on the surface, and definite purpose lives in the depths. You find it by going quiet enough and staying long enough that the deeper voice can be heard. You find it by asking the question and then waiting patiently for the answer to arise from a place beneath your ordinary thinking. The answer, when it comes, will not always be logical. It will not always be convenient. It may even be inconvenient in ways that frighten you, but it will carry the unmistakable feeling of recognition, the sense that you are remembering something you have always known but had forgotten. This is the voice of your infinite intelligence, and it speaks only to those who have made themselves quiet enough to hear it. I have noticed over the years that the men who thrive in silence develop a peculiar relationship with time. They do not seem to be in a hurry, and yet they accomplish more than the hurried. They appear to have all the time in the world, and yet they waste none of it. This is because they have stopped confusing motion with progress. The hurried man, the man who is always busy, who is always running from one task to the next, is often the man who is getting nowhere. The man who thrives in silence has learned to distinguish between motion and progress. He moves slowly when slowness is required and swiftly when swiftness is required, but he does not move from anxiety. He moves from intention, and intention, properly cultivated in the soil of silence, accomplishes more in an hour than anxiety can accomplish in a year. I want to share with you a practice that has served me well and which I have seen serve many of the great achievers I have studied. It is the practice of the morning hour, the hour before the world begins its demands. In this hour, you do not check messages, you do not consume news, you do not engage with any voice except your own. You sit with your definite purpose, you speak it to yourself. You see it clearly in your imagination. You allow your subconscious mind to receive it again, freshly, as the first instruction of the day. This hour, repeated daily for a year, will transform you more than any course you could take or any teacher you could find. It is not the content of the hour that matters most. It is the consistency of it. Day after day, the same return to the center, the same renewal of focus, the same descent into the silence where you can hear yourself again. The light in the struggle is this, that the very difficulty of practicing focused silence in our age is itself a sign of how desperately we need it. If it were easy, it would not be transformative. The forces arrayed against your attention are powerful precisely because the prize they are stealing is so valuable. The fact that you must fight to reclaim your focus is the proof that your focus is worth fighting for. And every small victory you win, every morning hour you protect, every distraction you refuse, every silence you enter on purpose is a deposit in an account that compounds invisibly until one day you wake up and discover that you have become a different person. You have become the one who possesses himself. You have become the one who can sustain a definite purpose through the inevitable storms. I have spoken much in my lifetime about the 6 ghosts of fear, those phantoms that haunt the human mind and prevent it from claiming its inheritance. But I have come to see that beneath all 6 fears lies a single deeper fear, the fear of one's own depths, the fear of what we might find if we sat still long enough to look, the fear of the unlived self, the abandoned dreams, the truths we have been avoiding. This is why the modern man fills his life with noise, not because he loves the noise, but because he fears the silence. And yet the silence is not his enemy. The silence is the doorway through which his greatness must pass. To refuse the silence is to refuse the greatness. To enter the silence, even with trembling, is to begin the journey toward the man one was meant to become. Carnegie told me, on another evening many years later, that the most important meeting a man ever has is the meeting with himself. Most men, he said, spend their entire lives avoiding this meeting. They schedule 1,000 other appointments to avoid the one appointment that matters most. But the man who finally sits down with himself, who looks himself in the eye, who asks himself the questions he has been afraid to ask, and waits for the answers he has been afraid to hear, this man begins to live. Everything before that meeting was preparation. Everything after it is the real life. And the meeting can only happen in silence, because silence is the only place where the masks come off and the true face is revealed. When you begin to thrive in silence, you will notice changes in yourself that you may not have anticipated. You will become more sensitive to the quality of the people around you. The shallow conversations that once seemed normal will begin to feel exhausting. The relationships that drained you will reveal themselves for what they are. You will find yourself drawn to deeper minds, to quieter souls, to the small circle of people who can match the new frequency at which you are operating. This is the natural law of resonance. As you become more substantial, you attract more substance into your life. The mastermind allies you have been seeking will begin to appear, not because you have advertised yourself, but because you have become the kind of person such allies recognize, like calls to like in the unseen world as surely as in the visible one. I want to leave you with a question, because the questions we sit with shape us more than the answers we collect. When was the last time you spent an hour alone with your own mind, without any input, without any distraction, without any agenda, except to listen? If you cannot remember, then you have located the place where your work must begin. The path to thriving in silence does not require any tool you do not already possess. It does not require any circumstance you do not already have. It requires only the decision to begin and the discipline to continue. The silence is waiting for you. It has been waiting all along. It has been waiting to give you back the self you misplaced somewhere in the noise. It has been waiting to introduce you, perhaps for the first time, to the man you were always meant to be. Focus is the gathering of your scattered fires into a single flame. Discipline is the daily tending of that flame. Silence is the chamber in which the flame burns hottest, undistracted by the winds of the world. These three together are the forge in which a destiny is shaped. Apart, they are nothing. Together, they are everything. The world will not always understand what you are doing. It will sometimes mock the quietness, mistake the discipline for rigidity, misread the focus as obsession. Let it. The world's understanding has never been the price of admission to a great life. The price of admission has always been the willingness to walk the inner path, alone if necessary, in silence if required, with discipline as your only companion and your definite purpose as your only map. Walk it and you will arrive. The men who have gone before you have left the trail well marked. All that remains is for you to begin.